I'm Joshua Adams, and this is the Industry Insights Podcast, where I am joined in the Rock Paper Simple studio by community leaders as we dive into industry topics and perspectives. Thanks for joining us today. I have George Taylor, President and Chairman of NVHS. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, delighted to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So before we dive into our subject today, which we're going to chat a bit about homelessness. We're talking about prevention. We're going to talk about homelessness in our veteran population. Before we dive into that, I'd like you to share kind of some of the background, what you guys do, and why it's so impactful.
Okay, so we started out in 2008 in Titusville, Florida. And so my father founded the organization. At the time, there's about 1,800 homeless veterans that were living in Brevard. So him and his friends would go to the woods up there by the DAV, Chapter 109 in Titusville, and go try to find homeless veterans, give them food, and primarily we're trying to get them into the VA. That was pretty much their main goal. And so as things evolved, they originally thought, well, you know what, maybe we can build a tent city, then all the homeless veterans could go live there, nobody bother them. Nobody really wants that in their backyard. That's first and foremost. So finally looked at it, see what we were doing, and determined that actually what was unique about what we were doing was they would go out into the woods, interacting with the homeless veterans and getting plugged into housing and the VA. So, and that became our mission in 2009. So I served as the vice president through the whole, until my father passed away in 2020, and I became the president. So today we have transitional housing facilities in Brevard County, 4 of them, can house 17 homeless veterans at any one point in time. And then our biggest programs are search and rescue programs, where it has 2 fronts to it. One is we go out into the woods and the parks and interact with homeless veterans and get them plugged into housing, essentially try to get them off the streets. And the other part is our prevention program, which has really gotten busy over the last couple of years, which is stopping evictions from happening, doing case management to prevent their homelessness in the first place.
I love the going and seeking, right? Yeah. That happens with what you guys do. There's kind of that, I think you call it search and rescue.
Yes,
is that it? Yeah. And I think that's so true. And I was having a conversation with Amy Lyon over at New Life Mission about this concept of what helping is, especially in the context of homelessness. And a lot of what we talked about was connect with people, actually connect with them. She says, is it really that novel of an idea to ask them their name, to connect with them?
Right.
Because I think there's a fear element. There's people they're not sure how to interact with, and I think it's kind of fundamental from your dad even just getting this started was go out, find them, talk to them.
Oh yeah, that's really truthfully we've always looked at collaboration is a big deal. We're not really trying to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of good agencies in Brevard County that can help somebody with various situations, with family, no family, not really married but still together. So there's all kinds of different situations with income. So we just essentially find the agency that best suits their needs at the time. Build a rapport is the most important thing. The long-term homeless in particular, it's important to build a relationship with. Sometimes it takes years of interacting with them. And we're pretty hard on them, but we make sure that the burdens of homelessness are reduced to a level that's manageable. But as soon as they're ready, essentially we're always talking to them saying, hey, whenever you're ready to stop living outside and the heat and the bugs and the storms and the cold, we got a house for you. So that's really the one thing. And so not every client has a one size fits all. So really it's just at the end of the day, it just boils down to relationships with people, just talking, having a conversation and finding what's best for them. So so that the outreach program, no matter what level is on the streets, that's always going to be like that's a core to our culture as an organization.
So digging into this a little bit deeper, talking a bit about prevention, can you share, what does that mean, right? What is prevention? What's the methodology and the thought process there? And then let's dig into a little bit more of that.
So there's the ultimate goal is to prevent somebody from finding themselves in a situation where they could become homeless in the first place. More often than not, most people try to work through their issues, their financial situation. Tomorrow I'll get another paycheck or something will happen. And then eventually they find out, well, I'm not got a 3-day notice. I'm getting evicted and please help. And so that's pretty much the bulk of what I would say prevention. Anybody in our line of work that talks about prevention is essentially somebody that's imminently at risk of losing their home and need help and they need immediate intervention to stop that from happening. So the main thing for prevention for me is that hopefully the end state would be that people are, and stabilized. They have a reliable income, savings, and all that type of stuff. So they would never need or find themselves in a situation where they have a 3 day notice. But more often than not, that's not the case. And then even if you do have a couple months of savings, you probably don't have 6 months, 9 months, 10, whatever that timeline is for you to get your job back. So for us, that's really one of the big things we focus on now. We get a lot of calls that are people are imminently at risk of losing their houses, and so we work with partners or through our own funding to stop the eviction, work with the landlords, issue intent to pay, and stop it from happening, so they don't end up on the streets and us having to go give them a tent.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, what does that look like in practicality as far as rolling out something like that, right? You didn't start with prevention. You started with going and meeting people where they were at, right? So, what led you to it? How did you? What does that looks like in your organization?
We started out 1,800 homeless veterans in Brevard County. Now there's less than 200 as of the last point in time count.
Wow.
And so a lot of those are your definitely long-term homelessness, very difficult cases. And so we've essentially found some room in our operating bandwidth to be able to help other clients. And so we started out with helping veterans at Christmas with, like, we would help with your rent or whatever. People would nominate veterans that were struggling, and we'd help them with their rent. And then slowly but surely started realizing that this was there's a big gap there. VA provides funding through some agencies in Brevard County, Volunteers America in particular. They have a VA grant funding that allows for some prevention services, but all government programs have stipulations. Some of it is income driven. So if you're like $50 more on the income side, then the grant will allow you. So 51% versus 50% AMI, then they can't help you. So we started noticing there was a gap. And so that's when we started working with veteran organizations and stuff to help, come together and provide the case management for these people. Because we don't want to just pay off something and then they're in trouble in a month later. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to just throw money at the situation and give them pay off a bill, and then they're at risk again next month. So there's a lot of, we do a very detailed review on their money, on everything they spend, and essentially say, hey, this is what happened to you. We're going to solve this problem now. This is what you need to do to get fixed. And sometimes the solution isn't what they want to hear. Sometimes they want to say, well, okay, I can still afford my $2,500 a month rent, but in reality, they can't. So sometimes it's like, we're going to get you situated so that you can move to another property that you can afford. We can help with that. Or sometimes it's, you need to go to transitional housing, kind of regroup your life, because now your expenses, maybe you got hurt, you're a laborer, and you're probably never going to be able to lay blocks again. So you got to figure out something else. So it's a lot of, they're in a stressful point in time. So again, you don't want to treat them like a government agency and just, be heartless about it. You want to, build a relationship with them, understand that they have a place, they have a role in their situation, but ultimately we want to make sure that they're secure so that 90 days, 120 days, a year later, they're still stable. So that's pretty much the basis of our prevention efforts.
Does it come up a lot that there's a lot of kind of financial literacy aspects of this?
I'd say it's just poor budgeting. Yeah. So yes, financial literacy, without a doubt. They have maybe they have a really successful month, and they, maybe they're in the services, they get tips or whatever. So they start to live off that as their normal income. And then they realize quickly that, oh, maybe I should have saved some of this for whenever things go down later on. So I'd say financial literacy. The other thing is what you see a lot is the veterans in particular that are older. And so you find a lot of people that are, their whole life they were working, they were trying to do the best they could. And then all of a sudden now they're older, especially if you're a laborer. It's not as easy to go paint a house when you're 70 years old. So those are the ones that are difficult. So with those, there's when they become at risk, there's government programs like a HUD voucher, which is essentially a Section 8 voucher for homeless veterans. And so we can get them plugged in there. So now they're reduced, like maybe their Social Security income, they pay a portion of that, and they can stay stably housed for the rest of their life. So there's a lot of different options out there, but most important thing is you got to know what's available, and then be very good at convincing them that this is probably the more stable path for you going forward.
I think, you mentioned prevention, and I think that as we look at the challenges we face, the challenges that nonprofits face in general, but especially homelessness, is we can continue to treat the symptoms.
Oh, definitely.
But if we don't try to get to the root of it, then I think we never really gain ground. I think you guys have done a great job of getting to the root of it. I love that number, 1,800 down to 200 is
Yeah.
awesome. Congratulations, well
Oh,
done.
thank you.
Thank you for that. But I think there's more as you look at the bigger homelessness challenge, even outside of just veterans. I think there's a lot of we can do as a society, even from a prevention standpoint. You mentioned financial literacy is something I'm passionate about. Teaching people about money and understanding their money, basic budgeting, even can make a world of difference. Helping people understand where is my money going and what and why. Why does that matter? Being able to understand long term thinking around money, being able to understand well, what happens when I retire, right? Am I thinking about that?
Yeah.
And most people put that off for way too long. And so it's an area that I get excited about. But I think as you look at other missions of other nonprofits that are looking to work on things, I think there's some ingredients there for some prevention as well.
Oh, no doubt. So one of the things we looked at, recently we created an endowed scholarship with Eastern Florida State College Foundation that essentially we used our reserve funds to, we created it in honor of my father from the
Oh wow.
organization. But what's awesome about it is that from this point forward, forever, there'll be a scholarship available to veterans or their spouses going into trades or STEM programs, Eastern Florida State College. And then they'll be able to, and if they volunteer, they'll be able to receive this scholarship through that. So I'm really like my father's future vision was going out into the woods, finding people. My vision is that we create a society around here that an ecosystem that ensures that the veteran doesn't ever need our services to begin with. And so one of the things is income stability, and education obviously provides a means to do that. So the other thing is we're working with right now. We're Lead Brevard. We're one of their community action projects. And one of the things we're talking about with them that they're building an action plan on is I believe that a lot of information, there's a ton of resources available for veterans, like tons of them. But if you Google, I'm a veteran, I need help, it's not that easy to decipher what is applicable to you and what can actually help your current situation right now. And so one of the things we'd like to do is like through marketing and social media awareness and through Google ad grants and things like that is essentially put how tos and teach um, you know veterans how to access information. Ultimately, I'd like to see there's a lot of I'm a big fan of the Chat GPT and the Being Copilot. I believe that there's a place for right now. Our services involve veterans having to talk to a case manager, which is pretty much any social service organization. It has to be a human being that has the time to work with somebody managing lots of cases, underfunded. But one of the things would be if you could have through conversational AI, have a program that on the website that essentially they say, hey, I'm a veteran that's married with two kids and I have, my income's this and I'm disabled or whatever. And essentially puts out localized to where they live, a case plan so that they can action and obviously have contact information for the organization. But I think just a lot of people knowing at the time of need through marketing and through conversational generative AI could really solve a lot of their problems long before they get a 3-day notice. So that's kind of stuff that I want to really focus on. And I think as far as affordable housing goes, and obviously Florida's not, it's very expensive. Brevard County in particular is very expensive, but there's programs out there like the Live Local Act that are, they're going to be long time to see all those units getting out there. But I think if we can increase the affordable housing pool and have nonprofits that are out there, playing whack-a-mole, solving the symptoms of the problem, and then look at strategies in the future that, through education, financial literacy, and then at the time of need, availability of resources and marketing, and in conversational AI. I think all those together will greatly reduce the need for people becoming homeless in the first place.
Oh, that's awesome. You've certainly got a vision there. I love the legacy of your dad being carried on.
Yeah.
I met him a long time ago, and we've been bumping each other for over a decade.
Oh yeah.
And so it's just really cool to see that journey that's been happening. Looking at all of the big picture of what you guys are doing, what other organizations like you are doing, but how do you bring that down to ground level with somebody like me, a business owner in the community, right? What can we do, right? How can we lend a hand towards, especially towards the prevention side of things, or as a society moving towards one that prevents this from happening in the first place? What can we do?
I mean, obviously, any opportunity that you guys are the biggest driver of economic output in the areas is business owners. So you guys, hopefully you guys are all successful and you keep hiring people, and we can refer people to get a well-paying job. But the other thing is obviously being aware of the situation that's out there. I think that one of the things when I talk with the Florida Supportive Housing Coalition, one of the things I talked to them about was the everything you're putting out there that's like Live Local Act and those things like that. You're sending it to nonprofits, and we already know about it. So it's not really helping the situation. What you need to do is advertise to private developers, private businesses, and let them see the benefits of tax credits and things like that to make a housing affordable. Because it doesn't have to be a safety net it's just by donations or by government grants. Through the private sector, you guys can and business owners overall can create investment opportunities, which by default will allow for more affordable housing to be created. And you're going to find a need at some point when you need to hire people, and they don't make enough to live where they work. And so maybe there's some kind of, maybe if Amazon maybe one day makes apartments for all their employees, that's the type of stuff that I think is beneficial. So I think really just being aware of the situation. We're all in this, as a community, we're all in this together. The inflation impacts everybody. Cost of services impacts everybody. Well, the same thing, it impacts the people that work for businesses. Makes life very unaffordable for them and puts them at risk. So in Brevard County, you have 4,700, according to the census, you have 4,700 veterans that are living at poverty. So in my opinion, I consider them all at risk. They live way below the income they need to be able to buy, purchase a home here. So really it's just get educated on what the situation is, what kind of resources are available, because I'm a firm believer that as more people that are educated on what's available to help somebody get to a better place, then, if my team is only 20 people deep, right? So if I have 1,000 people that are at least aware of the resources and run into people, they can share the information and put somebody on a better path. And if worst case scenario, there's a veteran that needs help, tell them to call us.
So I'm sure you have plenty of stories to share. Can you share any stories of successes that you've seen as you guys have worked in the community?
Yeah. So one of my favorite ones, so during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a veteran that was essentially was allowed to live in somebody's backyard because he was helping them get through some renovations. The guy was a career electrician. He's a good handyman. And so he was essentially remodeling their bathroom. And as a gift, he was allowed to sleep in his backyard. So he got a hold of us because he essentially seen one of our vehicles going down in Melbourne and said, hey, you know what? Can I get a tent? Because I'm living, I live outside. And so we started working with them. And this guy's, he's not a drug addict. A lot of people think that people that are in a homeless situation that are addicted to drugs or alcohol, that's not the case with this individual. And so we go ahead, we get them placed into, at the time during COVID, VA was funding hotel rooms for homeless veterans that were living on the street. So we got him plugged into that program. And so, all right, this guy's going to be easy to place. He's got relevant skills. He's going to be able to go into housing, and then we get him, gets a job offer, and then whoop, can't do that. So then we find out, well, it's because he has an open warrant from a traffic accident that he received an injunction and then never went to. So he's had for like 10 years. And for 10 years, he's had this injunction that's been sitting out there, and he's been kind of just working under the table ever since to kind of avoid it. So we tried working. So at the time, we have a couple attorneys on our board. We were like, is there anything we could do? We were working with the judges, the clerk of courts. The injunction was in Palm Beach County, so it's not even in Brevard. And so we're trying to work through this with this guy. And ultimately, we got a hold of the clerk of courts in Palm Beach. And they said, well, here's what we can do. Write a letter that says, essentially he's a homeless veteran that's going to be, this is preventing him from getting a job and getting him into housing programs. That's the other thing. All the housing programs, transitional housing, all those programs, they couldn't get him in because he had an open warrant. So the warrant was ultimately what was stopping this guy from being, nicely housed. And so we wrote this letter down to the clerk of courts. Jennifer, our chief operations officer, she drove him down to Palm Beach County. He had to get booked, but he immediately got turned right back out. We paid his bond. And so for $700, and a trip down to Palm Beach.
Oh my
Into that, he immediately
goodness.
gets into
10 years of being stuck. And
Absolutely.
you guys got him out of it for $700 and
Yeah,
a drive.
exactly. So, and it was,
That's
and just having a
wild.
conversation with the clerk of courts, like, look, we don't need this guy sitting in jail. So we took care of that. And then we were able to help him with his, the injunction fees, which was like $1,000. And so once with all that together, we pretty much eliminated any barriers to his, that was causing him to be homeless. So we, got him into a transitional housing. He got into the HUD-VASH program. He got a job, worked, was making good money, and then eventually made it to Social Security age and living his life and successfully housed up in Titusville to this day. And just a great person, but just a series of unfortunate events, a divorce and a car accident, a loss of insurance, all these things. For 10 years, he hit underneath the radar, and within a couple of weeks of working with us, now he's permanently housed.
Wow. Wow. That is such a cool story. And I just think, I think about how easily it would be for somebody to judge that guy
Oh yeah,
from the outside, not knowing the story. Right. And can you imagine, not in a million years would that person have guessed that from the outside, that that's what he was going through. Right. As simple as that is. Oh, he's got a warrant. Oh, and not, there's just that general jumping to conclusions that happens. He must have all these issues. Well, in this case, it was literally one bad decision that then he probably began to procrastinate, and then he was afraid of, and it was probably fear generated. Right? So it was probably this fear of, I'm going to go to jail, so I'm just going to avoid it entirely and stay away from it. And I'm sure that was the motivation. And next thing you know, it causes this cascade of events that 10 years later, this guy's homeless, sleeping, in the backyard. And that's just, I think I would be eye opening to a lot of people to hear those stories, to go, whoa, I wouldn't even considered that. Right. But that's such a cool story. It wasn't that much work that needed to be done to change this guy's life forever. So it's very, 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 very cool.
Compassion is the biggest thing. The people like our volunteers that go out into the woods, and even our staff that that do the case management side of it. This isn't just a job or something to them. They're very compassionate. They're very invested in these people, these clients, lives. They take it personally. And so when you have somebody that's, going to keep encouraging you and coaching you and to go across, to get to a stable situation, it changes their life. Sometimes like with older veterans, we had a veteran one time. So this guy was stably housed his whole life. He was an older veteran, no issues at all. Well, they were going to, remodel his apartment complex. And as a result of the remodel, they were going to go ahead and raise his rent. And so now the rent became totally unsustainable. And so he's in the Publix parking lot and he's like, no idea what I'm going to do. And then he sees one of our vans and he's like, well, I'm a veteran that's about to be homeless. Hey, can you help me? I need help. Like I'm in a bad spot here. And so we were very easily working with partners. Like we're partnered with like the Military Officers Association of Cape Canaveral. We were able to work with them to get this guy's deposits paid, to get him into a place he can afford. And it was very quick and easy. I mean, we really pride ourselves in particular on how fast we move. For a veteran that's living on the streets, that's like, I need to get off the streets right now. We get you in a place in 48 hours. I mean, it's not that hard. Once we know that you're ready to go, there's lots of resources lots of resources available to veterans of Brevard County. Really, we like to, you just got to make sure you educate them, say, hey, this is the options available to you, and then get in there. But we got to move quick sometimes.
Right. And I think that comes back to that idea of the general public. What can we do? Being educated, knowing what the resources are, being able to point people to those resources, being willing to take the time to say, hey, I know of this resource. Let me connect you. Let me make a phone call. I was talking to somebody earlier about, I had forgotten that this happened. We were talking about homelessness with another nonprofit that serves the space. And I remember walking into a restaurant, and a gentleman came up to me, and he was homeless, and him and his daughter, and was asking for help, and took a minute and talked through it. And I didn't know where to point him to. I was most of my experience in homelessness in Brevard has been in serving with New Life Mission. So women with children, right? Not men. And so I don't know where to send you. So I made a phone call. I'm like, hold on, let me make a phone call. I called New Life Mission and said, where should I send this guy? Ended up connecting him, actually made the phone call, handed him the phone. He talked through, so there was that dialogue of being able to find somewhere, right? And find a resource. And I never would have done that had I not been involved in a nonprofit organization to understand that, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so I think more of us knowing, hey, where can I point people to, or at least knowing where to start, where to make that phone call, how to get pointed in the right direction, I think is really, really important.
Oh yeah, the biggest thing for just anybody overall, the 211 is a good starting point. So unfortunately, there isn't. Truly, there's way more homeless non-veterans and homeless families than there are veterans. And so, what's tough for us in this line of work, honestly, is that we have all these resources available for our veterans. The guys like, sorry, I never served. I'm like, well, 211. That's the
Right.
best starting point. For those people. I think we really, as a community, we have a big mental health and substance abuse lack of resources for those situations. And I'd say, especially nowadays, if you look at for California or any of these places where like drug abuse and with the homeless population is just enormous. I think mental health. A lot of people. I say most people that become homeless, the initial part of it is just a string of bad luck, right? You didn't save money, you lost your job, you didn't have any family, you ended up on the streets. The longer that they're out there, I think the more they're exposed they become to just the stress of being homeless and living out there in that environment. And that contributes to mental health problems, which kind of prevents them from being amenable to working with an agency to get them off the streets. But then ultimately, and then obviously the substance abuse becomes how they treat it. So,
Mm.
but right now, there's really not a lot of options for any not veterans or non-veterans if they have a substance abuse issue or they have a mental health issue. There's nothing really we can do with them outside of say, hopefully, good luck to you, and maybe go talk to these groups. So that's the hardest part. A veteran or somebody that just brand new homeless. I like to look at the brand new homeless and the long term homeless. Brand new homeless doesn't know about resources, not very good at the survival aspect, hates being outside. The whole problem, they're ready to move immediately. If you're within 6 months of being homeless, you get them off. They're going to be more willing to do whatever it takes to get off the streets. So longer somebody's out there on the streets, the less likely, the more comfortable they become in that lifestyle, the less likely they might want to consider a group situation. Very difficult, and not to mention the stress, post traumatic stress that comes from being homeless or whatever you've went through prior to getting there, and then substance abuse. So it's tricky out there. The biggest thing is for us, like I said, we've had success with the long term homeless, but it takes years sometimes.
Mm.
A lot of times, ultimately, the veterans are aging out, so they're living homeless. They think it's great. They've been homeless for 30 years. It's not that big a deal. I know where to get food if I need to get food. It sucks sometimes, especially when it's raining or a storm comes. But outside of that, I'm good being by myself in the woods. And then all of a sudden they get diabetes or they get cancer or they get some kind of disease. And then they go to the hospital, unfortunately, and then they realize this isn't what I want. And so, okay, we can get you into a place. But it took years to get there. But really, again, it all goes back, no matter what you're doing with helping people that are at risk of homelessness, helping homeless people. It's just you got to be compassionate, be smart. They're smart too, So you got to make sure that if they feel like they're gonna. I always recommend that if you're not in the homeless services world, um, refer them the resources, and let a professional that deals with them on a regular basis deal with that because they're pretty quick, and if they feel like they could take advantage of somebody sometimes they might. So just let a professional that's used to dealing with them, has access to all those resources, point them in the right direction. 211 Brevard is a great resource out there. And then obviously they're a veteran. I hope that they get a hold of, go to our website, nvhs.org. Right on the homepage, it says get help. They click it. It's an online, super easy intake form. And we'll get working on them immediately. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming and visiting, sharing kind of your perspective, what's going on. I think there's a lot that all of us can do. All of us can be involved. If somebody wants to be more involved, they can go to the website. You just listed it, but I'll have you listed again. But how can people get involved and help with what you're doing?
So we post so when you go to our website, nvhs.org, National Veterans Homeless Support.org, we have three main buttons right on the homepage. So you have get help, which is essentially that's the online intake form. It's super easy for a veteran. They can take pictures of their supporting documents or whatever's going on with their life. It takes just a few minutes. It's a GUI, very simple. So that's one way. And the other way is obviously there's a link that says get involved. You can go there, get that's where all our volunteer opportunities are on there. We have volunteer opportunities. I'm a volunteer myself, so there's volunteer opportunities for all ranges of things. With people out in the woods that are working in the office, doing marketing, finance, whatever those things are. We have a lot of use for volunteers, and then ultimately, if you want to help the organization, pay for all this stuff, there's donate today. There's lots of options there too. So
Right. Well, again, thanks for coming in.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Industry Insights. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, comment, or even drop us a line over at rockpapersimple.com.